The Power Factor Show. Episode 101.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Sponsored by Hodgton, the Gunpowder People.
Start the show.
Welcome to the Power Factor Show. I'm Caleb, and I'm here for this episode.
I'm Rick. I'm here for seemingly almost every episode.
I'm Larry. I guess I'm a permanent installation now, I think.
Where's my shotgun?
Who's that shotgun guy?
So, tonight's episode, we're talking about the recent F1 race in Austin. No, I'm kidding. Steve got really excited for a second.
That would have been good.
We're talking about trips to Dairy Queen.
Dairy Queen, yeah.
Yes.
And who's had them, and how they get handed out, and all of that fun stuff that gets involved when you get sent home from your match for...
Well, technically sent home is probably not an appropriate
That's fair.
term.
That's, yeah.
Right,
when you're not allowed to shoot anymore, but still asked to hang out and tape.
Yeah. I mean, well...
Your reward.
We'll get there. But a lot of people,
Right.
a lot of people interpret as a DQ as I'm done, I go home, I don't do anything else.
Right.
Of course, we had that one instance where that guy got DQ'd, didn't go home, it didn't do anything, but that was another story.
Well, so let's I guess the best way to start it off is to get a phrase. Well, wait, we don't have a trivia question or something.
Let's take care of some business first.
Yeah.
We've got a trivia question asked in episode 99, and that question was, I'll ask Caleb.
Yeah, well,
since he wasn't here to hear
time. Yeah.
So, you shoot a target, and it was almost a squib, but maybe you had, I don't know.
USPSA or IDPA?
USPSA question. Right. Let's say you had, I don't know, maybe it takes half a grain of powder, I don't know, in your case.
Sure.
So, the bullet leaves the barrel, hits the target, but it does not penetrate the target. It's
stuck in the target.
It's either stuck in the target or
bounces
off and it leaves a nice dent right in the target.
Or hole.
But
sure.
it does not
fully penetrate the target. Does that shot count for score?
Are you paying attention to all this?
I am.
Right.
The pass-through part makes me feel like if it does not fully pass through the target, it doesn't count for score.
That's correct.
Yeah!
That's correct.
Yeah, very good.
50-50, right?
Yeah.
So let's...
we're going back again.
Well,
I'm certain
I am
100%.
There's no way that counts for score. So that's rule 9.5.9.
That just seems kind of... I hesitate to say this, but common sense. Like, if your bullet doesn't actually go through the target...
Well, I think that rule showed up in 2004.
An example of that, where I think that may have come up into play, is you have a drop-turning target, and guys would shoot the drop-turning target right as it's going away, and they hit it, and it cut a nice trough right through the middle of the target.
But it didn't actually...
And it would literally cut a trough such that it broke the paper out the back side, but it kind of like, it did this sort of thing as it went through.
Got it.
So it cuts a groove right through, but it never actually goes through the target. It just basically cuts a hole right across.
That would be hard to score.
That would be hard to determine. But
well, your point being is it's not a scoring target. It's not a scoring hit because it did not penetrate or go through.
What's the rule say?
Well, do you want to paraphrase? Because I got a paraphrase here.
I like paraphrasing.
Okay, paraphrase.
All right, okay, let's just look it up. 959.
Probably comes right after 958, right?
Hits upon scoring or no-shoot paper targets must completely pass through the target to be considered a valid hit and count for score or penalty, as the case may be.
Dude, I would love to see a target that actually had a bullet sticking in it.
Well,
that would be crazy.
Has happened. It has happened. Yeah.
I'm sure it has.
So here's
out of all of our correct answers, which again we'll reiterate the rule, we'll take your answers for an entire week. And by the time the airing of the next episode, we'll cut it off and randomly select amongst all the correct answers. And this week was Randy Finfrock. So thanks for playing, Randy. Thanks for playing every week.
What did Randy get?
Randy got something. What did he get? A mug.
A mug?
I think he's got a mug.
Great. Good luck.
So
USPSA mug.
So I'll ask Caleb two questions here. Actually, this is the same question. This is kind of somebody asked a question about your floppy IPSC targets that were wet and the head was bent over and so on and so forth. But let's say you have a drop turning target and somebody shoots a drop turning target and you can determine that the bullet actually came from the backside going to the front.
Like visually determine that the bullet
Yeah,
came
because
from the
you can
backside?
see
because the
the
papers
papers pushed out through the front of the
Okay.
target to the back. How do you score that?
I got a 50-50 shot on this one. I'm going to go with that is a hit because it doesn't say in the rulebook that it's got to hit it in the front.
Oh, yes, it does.
Actually, it does say that, yeah.
You never know. Say 50-50,
Yeah.
so it actually says...
It sounded good. It sounded like
did.
you seemed pretty convincing.
I had some...
where I was going with that is somebody asked the question, okay, so if the head is flopping over and of the target and it goes through the upper panel, the head zone, passes through and then goes through the C zone, how are you going to score it? Okay, well, first off, one, you can't count hits going through the back of the target.
Right.
And targets are impenetrable, so technically it's a miss.
Oh, interesting.
And the right thing to do is change the target.
Well, yeah. Don't get there in the first place, but assuming you did.
But we did in episode 100,
right.
as some viewers pointed out. So and that's just when it's a miserable day and you just want to power through and get the heck out of there. So.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when we were shooting a match down, I think it was in Arizona, and it started, maybe it was in Nevada, and it started to rain. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, let's bring out the raincoats.
I was there.
And
Northwest shooters are going to rule the rest of this match.
Yeah.
And instead, everybody sits down and waits for it to stop raining.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, come on.
Because it only rains for 15 minutes down there.
exactly.
It's not like up here.
They had no rain target bags.
Right.
You probably never heard of
Because
it.
it's Arizona.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, for those of you, we talk about weather conditions and in which, they shoot in different parts of the country. And the idea that the head is leaning over, if you've never seen a head leaning over before, you might think, why don't they replace those targets? Well, by the end of a typical match in our area, every target has the head leaning over like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't
It doesn't even need
have,
to rain. It can just be like
we
moist
don't have 3
outside.
sets of targets to put out there every time the head's
And if it was a level 2 or level 3 match, we would be replacing it.
Sure, yeah. But for a local club match,
right.
the raincoat goes on, which is a shirt bag. For those of you who've literally never seen it, it's a clear shirt bag like you get at the
Then
lawn.
you cut it down the front with a pocket knife.
Hang it over the target. Then, of course, as the bag gets wet, it gets heavy. It gets full of holes, which means water starts leaking in on the target. And so the weight of the water on the soggy target starts to drag the head over.
the head bends at the perf.
Yeah, and if it's not a headshot target, it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Right.
You'll still be shooting at the head anyway. And so in practical terms,
You know what we could
just
do to
let
solve
it set.
this? Switch to classic targets across the sport.
Oh, yeah. I can hardly wait. But yeah, so anyway, so the deal with the heads is it's very common to see the heads leaning over. If it matters, the target will be replaced.
Have you seen
But generally it doesn't matter.
these? I forget where I was. There was a place that had rain, and they have
That'll be here.
3-prong target stand. So instead of 1-2 staples like you do on all of these, it was
Supports the
1,
head.
2, and then there was a third stake in the middle that you stapled the middle, just the head box.
That would
to.
be kind of broken very fast, wouldn't it? If you're
Yeah.
making
The
A-zone hits.
well,
Yeah,
but
some
still,
is really accurate.
you'd have from the top of the A zone to the top of the head, still supporting it.
Yeah, I mean they got shot up, but
not a bad idea.
they used a heavier gauge wood. So we use really. The funny thing about the local clubs up here is the sticks that we use are really thin. The clubs I shot at in Indiana use 2x2, and they'll have 35-mile-an-hour winds as a common occurrence. So you need a heavier stick, so the target doesn't blow over. And range conditions often dictate equipment used on the range. I've had stages thrown out because forward-falling max traps won't fall forward because there's a 30-knot wind blowing on it. You shoot the popper and you go to the max trap and you're like,
Activate.
okay then, I'm gonna go get a range equipment malfunction.
Right on. Well,
Okay, let's talk.
So Derek, DQs.
Let's talk DQ.
Talk
So
about
who here
DQs.
has had?
I guess should we start
who
on
here
this
has had
end?
DQ? Yeah, let's. Yeah. So how
Knowing
many
what I
years
know.
of shooting experience?
Oh, years of shooting experience. Competition exactly 10 years.
How many DQs?
4.
Rick?
Well, if you shot one match a year, 10 years of competition would be 10 matches, right?
How many years of shooting? How do you be?
I'm trying to get an idea of how many times have you
It doesn't need to be
DQ'd versus
weighted.
how many times have you been exposed.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but,
Yeah.
but
15 years of shooting, 2 DQs.
All right.
I started shooting IDPA in 2007, so we'll use that as a reference. And so that'd be 5 years and 0, but I should have had 2. And how about you?
So let me see. I'm going to say I started in 93, so technically it'd be 20, but since I kind of stopped last year, we're going to call it 19 and 0. But like yourself, I have had a couple like where it's like Did I just break the 180 there? No, you were really close, but it was all right. That sort of a deal.
Well, I've had a few 179s myself.
Yeah.
That
179.8.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
in Larry, your case, I know 2 of them were the holster issue.
Yep.
And there may have been
3,
more than that.
let me think.
There were literally 2 back to back.
3 of them. Yeah, two. My first 2 were back to back just a couple of years ago. So I went 8 years without a DQ.
Yeah.
I had a race holster issue. The first one, I don't know. My friends have all heard the story probably numerous times, but the first one I could never replicate. I had the STI limited gun perched on the holster, which I guess I don't need to name the brand, but there's no way. If the gun's in the holster and it's latched, it cannot come out unless you lift up. If it's locked, it ain't coming out at all. And somehow I managed to perch the gun on the holster without actually having it latched. The start position was arms straight up, and I bumped the beaver tail and the gun went forward. And I thought, how in the heck did that happen? Because I'm sure I moved between putting the gun down but I went home and tried to replicate that, and I could not balance the gun on the holster without it being latched. And when it's latched, it ain't coming out forward. It can only come out up. So
you had 2 gun DQs.
That was that one. And then just a couple of weeks later, it was like the next match. We were working on a prone stage, and I went prone. I shot my 6 rounds, and I got up, and I just chucked the gun into the holster, just muscle memory. That's where the holster is supposed to be. And the holster had rotated when I went prone. Oh. And so the gun kind of bounced out. It didn't get latched as I tossed it into the race holster, which I should have been more careful than that.
So what were your other two DQs on? 180s.
One of them was an AD.
Really?
But it was it was during a reload. It was actually it was more of a gun malfunction. I was shooting it open, and we've shown off my open gun before, but I had the magazines just fully loaded, just tight, and I went to reload and hit the reload, and as I had time, I had distance to cover, and I thought, I want to make sure this magazine is seated, and I hit it a second time, and I went, blam! And I was like, oh, crap. So took the gun.
And your finger was or was not in the trigger guard?
Absolutely was not. And so I took it home and I replicated that with dummy ammunition that I made on the press with no primers, no powder. And I could actually hit it hard enough to get the hammer to fall.
Wow.
And so
that's scary.
The gun went to John Larson immediately after that, and he fixed it up for me. So, and took away my nice pound and 3/4 trigger and made it 2.5 again, which was just fine. But yeah.
Okay, Rick.
Both of mine were 180s. The first one, the interesting thing is I shot again, like Larry. I think I probably shot for 8 or 10 years before I was DQ'd the first time, and it was and it's something that I illustrated and have discussed on the show before, where I sort of overran the target, which was on the other side of a wall that I could see through, and rather than back up and shoot, I could see through the wall this way, so I just put the gun on the other side of the wall, shot like this, and in my mind I brought the gun out like this, and then continued on.
But the RO saw
and the RO maybe saw this.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't argue it, what's the point of arguing it? It's not like it's going to be reviewed or anything. And I just felt like, okay, whatever, I'm not going to argue. The second one was more of a straightforward brain fart kind of a deal where we're moving downrange at a 45-degree angle, this being downrange, and then there's a row of targets on the side berm.
Yeah.
So as you move downrange, you're moving right to left, but you're also going down. And I'm watching people shoot the stage, and so they're going to this first port, and then they're shooting, and then they're like reloading and going to the next port. And I'm like, well, why aren't you shooting those targets on the side berm after the second port? Then the reload comes in perfectly. And so I'm coming up to the line with my secret plan, I'm not going to shoot those targets till after the second port. And go blam, 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 second port, and I whirl around, and of course I'm about 195 degrees. Well, that's why nobody shot him after the second port.
Damn.
So that was just one of those kind of, and that was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and certainly deserved it, but it was just one of those things where, I had planned in advance to do it and did it, and then realized why nobody else had done it that way.
Yeah.
Where it seems to me that most of the 180s are these kind of situational things where you screw up. It's why you break the 180. It's not something you do intentionally.
Right, yeah, intentionally.
So, you want me to talk about the fourth one I had?
Yeah.
So, those first three, they were equipment issues, and I just kind of got over them, and they, didn't bother me too bad, except for the holster situation I couldn't explain. But the most recent one, which was only a month and a half ago, that was my first 180, and I thought, man, I never thought I would ever 180. And we had a stage that was a total memory stage, and it was 30 rounds, 32 rounds, big wide open shooting area with just barrels everywhere around the perimeter, and targets behind the barrels. And so, did I see that one before? Did I see it again?
You're not sure what you shot from where.
Exactly. Did I re-engage? Did I forget to engage? I took, before the match even started, I was on the stage for 15 minutes. Hey, did anybody figure this out yet? Like, somebody tell me a secret here. Oh, you can only get that one from here and only get that one from there. So don't, those are the ones you're going to miss. And I spent every bit of my effort remembering my points. I had to be here. I got to move here. Get all my positions, all my footwork set. Never ever thought about a reload. So I start. In the kind of on the back left. I work my way around the back, and I'm starting to head up the right side, and I'm shooting directly across the range. I'm on the right side. I'm shooting to the left side, directly across the range, and the gun runs dry. I'm like, got to reload, and broke the 180.
That because when we did our IPSC 101, well, let me back up for a minute. There's seemingly what I envision. There's two types of people, or 2 points in their shooting career that do reloads. Do DQs. In the very beginning, when they're first figuring things out, and then when they start getting
complacent
and started getting aggressive and started pushing things.
Yeah.
When we would do our IPSC 101 classes that we had, one of the things that we always caution people on is if you have a gun malfunction or a reload on the 180 for a right-handed shooter, or if you're going, shooting to the left. The thing is, and let's say you guys are right in the 180, I'm shooting like here, my gun runs dry, the first thing you do is you bring it back and you go like this, and now all of a sudden the gun's going this way, breaking the 180. Or if it jams, blam, 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 gun jams, and you do this, and you basically come over the gun and look at it, and the gun breaks over the 180.
Now, in my mind, on that situation, the gun went dry, and I dropped the magazine and kind of turned on the axis of the muzzle, but apparently not. It was called a 180.
Well, the thing is, no matter what you do as a right-handed shooter, unless you do this and turn on the the axis of the muzzle, it's cramped.
You're gonna.
Your body naturally is going to pull back and do this.
Right.
And we would caution everybody, if you have this problem as a right-handed shooter or a left-handed shooter, depending which way you go, is that when it fails, turn yourself toward the berm and resolve the gun there, and then come back onto it.
Sure.
But people forget about it, and they go,
because they're trying to go quick.
Exactly. Right.
Bad shit
And the quick thing is that when people start pushing harder, is that, like Rick was saying, or whatever, you overrun targets, you kind of lose your perspective, because your idea is, I want to go down range, your body motion wants to go down range, and you're inclined to either go beyond targets or literally start shooting targets on the edge as you're going down, or like you're saying, as you're coming around a prop or whatever, rather than sticking the gun, pulling in and pushing through, you kind of do the drag thing where the gun will come back out and stuff. So
and you want to know the absolute most devastating thing about that 180? It was supposed to be a Power Factor show episode.
Nice.
So where's the video?
That was the first stage of the day. I was the first shooter, and
first stage.
That's
DQ'd.
Yeah.
So.
When it's funny, you should mention
Terrible.
the getting more aggressive is what causes problems. Because of the 2 times that I should have been DQ'd, the first time was when I was in college. I was shooting an NRA collegiate 50-meter free pistol match, and I had maybe a 4 or 5 ounce trigger on my 22, and I put a 22 round in the chamber. I closed the bolt, and for some reason, and I was 19 when this happened, so it was a while ago, and I remember I put my finger on the trigger while it was still pointed at the table in front of me. I looked over here for something, took a deep breath, and I heard a pop, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I just shot the table. And I looked around. Nobody saw anything. The ROs, nobody. So I just took that round out, set my gun down, because you have 60 minutes to shoot all this. So I set my gun down, and I walked away, and I sat on a bench and went, But the only action shooting one that happened to me was I was shooting the Virginia State IDPA match in 2011, and the stage was set up. You started with a shooting a carbine. This was before they outlawed this at IDPA matches. Or actually, it was after they outlawed it. The stage eventually got thrown out.
Because it was outlawed?
Because it turns out it was illegal, after the fact. So you started, it was a cool stage there. You started off shooting the carbine at some 50-yard targets, and then you ground it, so you had 6 rounds in the carbine, you shoot 6 shots, you ground the carbine, transition your pistol, and you engaged, it was 6 more targets while retreating. All right, so, bang, 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 bang. And I've done my reload, I'm backing up, and I'm swinging into the last target, and I see the last target with my eyes, because I've got my head over where I need to be, and I'm bringing the gun in, and I go,
goes to where your eyes
boom!
Yeah.
And I shoot the gun right here, and then I finish swinging, and I know the second I do it, I know exactly what I did, and I finish swinging the gun into the target and shoot the second shot. It happened so quick, the SO didn't catch me. He thought I had just fired a crappy shot at the first target.
Yeah.
But then when you go back and you watch it on tape, you can very clearly see the bullet hit the wall.
Yeah.
And then as I continue to move, you can actually see particle board flying across the front of the target while I shoot the second shot at the target.
And a split second of your eyes going, oh!
Yeah, and there's just that moment where I'm in my head, and I'm like, I should have been DQ'd. I was not aiming at a target or anything.
Okay, we'll get into that discussion here in a little bit about DQs that we've seen and called and ones that we didn't call, because I can give you many stories and situations like that.
It's not just going to be DQ war stories for a half hour?
No.
We have to talk about rules and stuff?
That's crazy.
So let's have a discussion of the worst DQ. I mean, and this is purely from the entertainment standpoint, if you want to call that this. But the worst DQs that you've either seen or been a part of.
Why don't you start, since you didn't have a DQ to
okay, so
contribute.
the worst DQ that I was on the receiving end of was up in Custer. The stage start was seated facing uprange.
Okay.
And I'm not going to name names, but the person got out of the chair, pulled the gun, drew it, then turned and went downrange and swept literally all of us standing there with whoa.
We were like, whoa, buddy.
Yeah, yeah. So that was I would say the worst DQ that I have been a witness and on the receiving end of in all my shooting.
The funniest one I ever saw was at an IDPA match. So the guy was wearing not a watch, not a wristwatch that has like holes, but like a clasp, like a buckle or whatever. And so on load and make ready, he loads and chambers around, and something on his watch catches, and it comes unclasped, so it's kind of hanging loose on his wrist. And he's got a loaded gun in his hand, and you can see the wheels are turning, and you're like, bad shit is about to happen, but there's nothing I can do about it. And so what he does is he takes his loaded gun, turns it muzzle up, grabs it by the barrel, so he's dumb, but he hasn't actually broken a rule yet. And then he goes to fix his watch and goes, and you can, I wasn't the safety officer, and I wanted to be like, stop him now. And you can just see, and because he goes to fix his watch, and it all just happens in slow motion. And the next thing you know, he's around with his watch. He's looking right down the barrel of a loaded gun. It's pointed back at everybody. And then the SO was so taken aback by this, he goes, "What? Shit! Stop!" Yeah, so that was the biggest clown show of a DQ I've ever seen.
So put it in the holster,
Yeah,
then
just
take care of your watch.
I guess the ones that I remember most vividly are the ones where the gun was pointed at me. I think that's generally the case.
Tend to get your attention.
Pointed at me rather than the shooter pointed it at himself.
Yeah.
There was a stage that for some reason 2 or 3 people DQ'd on it, and from the looks of it, it just looked like a normal stage. You were kind of moving along the 180 to get to the shooting position, but you would come up to the stack of barrels and then kind of have to duck around the right side to engage the targets. And 3 people then went like this to go back that direction. And so essentially the gallery is all here.
Oh, they got disoriented
and so
on that.
so instead of going like this and pulling the gun out this way and turning the muzzle downrange,
right,
they swung it completely around like this and went in the opposite direction.
Kind of like they just got disoriented on
Sort
the stage.
of, yeah. And I was looking at the stage later and beforehand, and until the first person DQ'd, it's just like, he screwed up. And then a second person does exactly the same thing. And then a third person does it. And I'm thinking to myself, what is it about the way this stage is set up that's causing normally safe shooters to swing the muzzle, completely through 180 degrees in the wrong direction?
Wow.
And I never could figure it out. We had a little, the staff people afterwards got together and discussed it. Did you have this weird sensation that you were facing a direction other than the direction that you were facing? And we never really could figure it out. But that was probably the weirdest, just to see somebody just turn the wrong direction.
Wow.
And absentmindedly, too. It's not like they turned and went, oh, God, They just turned and hauled ass the other direction. And I'm like, going, you just pointed the gun at 15 people. But, yeah, that was pretty weird.
The most memorable one for me would have been, the first ever, and maybe that's why it's most memorable, because it was the first one. But it was my first match ever. This is down in Florida, and I don't know anything about all these fancy, single action race guns and all that kind of stuff, and
newfangled
race holsters. And all I know is Glock, pretty much at that time, and there was a seated start, loaded gun, seated start, recipe for disaster. I mean, and it amazes me how many loaded gun, seated starts we see. So essentially what happened is, the guy, make ready, chambers around, puts the gun in the race holster, which is the bikini type where it only holds onto the trigger guard and the entire slide and everything is out there. Well, when you sit down, the muzzle bumps on your leg, and the only way the gun comes out is up. And so it pumps it up, and there is a fancy $4,000 SV pistol pointed uprange at everybody laying on the ground next to a folding chair.
Look at that!
I was like, ooh, and then of course, everybody clear out, and we're going to clear the gun and that kind of stuff. So that was a little hairy, and especially with as light of a trigger they have on those things. Of course, the safety should be functional and everything else, and hopefully it's still applied. But, and actually something similar happened on my most recent match as well, which was in the KidSap match that we just reviewed in episode 100. Another gun on the ground pointing up range. So.
What were the circumstances?
Circumstances were a jacket got hung up in the way, and on the draw stroke, it was a standing start, but the shooter drew the gun and got it tangled up in a jacket that he insisted on wearing, and wound up fumbling the gun.
Did it have those little drawstring cords on it? Because those are the
worst
friggin' things.
Maybe it might have. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
It's funny you're talking about getting guns pushed out, holsters or whatever, but I think you and I talked about that when we were talking about equipment and race holsters, and also mentioned it when we were talking about the Safari Land gear. Is that's one of the things that I've seen happen before, is that the race holsters that do not have a muzzle plug or whatever, and the muzzle is open on these seated stages, that the guys will have basically, they move their leg in a position, and like you said, the gun comes out one way, and their leg hits the muzzle, and it pushes the gun out that way, and all of a sudden you've got a gun around.
And that'll even happen if you've got like a Glock 34 in a Glock 17 holster.
Sure.
You can take an open-ended, like a blade.
Or in my case, a Glock 24 and a Glock 35 holster.
Yeah. And because if you
can bump it up a little,
open up the retention on, a CompTac or a BladeTech holster, you can stick your finger on it and pop it out and it'll just flop right out. Now, there's one more DQ that we haven't talked about. Should we talk about the Band-Aid DQ?
I think we could.
So our producer, and this is actually out there on the internet, had a pretty epic DQ at Area 1 in 2011.
2011.
The 2011 match. He was shooting revolver, and a truly comical series of incidents. He was wearing a Band-Aid on his support hand, and the ejector rod got stuck under the Band-Aid when he went to do a reload, and as he released his strong hand from the gun to do something, and the Band-Aid pulled, and the gun went one way, and he took a hand off to go for the reload because he used to do a strong hand reload, and it just went and the gun went one way and bullets went the other way, and you can actually hear it on, you can hear his verbal dejection on video. But the thing about it is, and we give him a hard time, but it's also a teachable moment. You know, I've seen guys who have gotten DQ'd because they've had, you know, jewelry get hung up on props.
Right.
You know, when I shoot matches, I don't wear a watch. When I
took my ring off.
When I was married, I would take my ring off when I'd shoot. Yeah. I don't want there to be anything on my hands or my arms
Something
that could hang up on a gun, that could hang up on a prop, that could. I've seen people hit hat cams. This was just mimed to me by our producer. He goes like this, and I'm like, oh, hat cams. But yeah, you know, because you get some of these crazy. You know, I wear a hat cam, and I try to keep it really low profile because I don't want to have 6 inches of gear sticking off the top of my head if I've got to go through a tunnel or around a corner or something. So you know, think about your gear. You know, if you wear jewelry at matches, that's probably not a good idea. You know. Don't wear big fancy hoop earrings, ladies. Right.